there are a lot of tips and tricks that can help you weed without weeding out your plants. So weeding without damaging your plants isn't too hard for something bigger like a cauliflower or a broccoli. You know, those are pretty tough plants. They're deeply rooted, and it's pretty easy to get in there and work around them, even with like a scuffle hoe or something. Peppers, tomatoes, not too bad. But when you get to the smaller stuff like the carrots, the beets, things like that, you can actually lose a lot if you're not careful weeding. So some of the tips and tricks to weeding, and obviously, yep, I went on vacation and things got crazy down here, so I've got some really big weeds. You know, there are some things that you can do, but the best trick is, first of all, to know, kind of get familiar with the weeds that are typical in your garden. So get to know and kind of identify them, at least to the point of identifying them as a weed, and also identify the plants in a row before you even start weeding. So that will help you sort out and kind of be able to identify more quickly on the fly. Other than that, one of the best things that you can actually do to help you weed without damaging your plants is either to weed after some rain or to water your garden, say like the night before or the day before. You don't really want to be working in mud, but you do want to be working in loose soil so that you can just pull the weeds out. What happens when we experience a lot of dry weather is that soil gets really hard and dry, and then you're pulling up clumps, and it's hard to pull up a single plant, whether it's a weed or anything. You tend to get a lot of them coming up in the same clump. But we just had a little bit of rain this morning, not a whole lot. We were fortunate to get another storm yesterday, so that's been helping matters, and that has really loosened up this soil so that I can easily pull that up, and also because the soil shakes off more easily, so I'm not losing so much of that soil, because when you pull it, when they're dried like that, what you end up with are it's almost like a rock. And again, it's going to grab up the plants that you're trying to keep and protect, and then you're actually chucking out a lot of your good garden soil too. So, those are some of the tips. One of the tips that I promote, and it sounds a little counterintuitive to people, but especially for things like carrots or beets, is to wait until they're big enough for you to be able to identify them, to kind of separate them and see them through the weeds. They are small to begin with. They look a lot like a grass, and it can be really easy to kind of lose them in the weeds. So sometimes, even though generally your best advice is to weed sooner rather than later and not let things get this big and out of hand, it also can be helpful in certain situations to actually give it a little time so that you can tell the difference between what's a weed and what's, say, a flower or a vegetable plant. Generally when you're pulling, you either want to pull straight up, but pulling to the side will usually take things out easier without breaking the plant, the weed, because, if you break that off, you could actually encourage weed growth. But a little pull to the side will help them come out. And then you're also pulling away from your plants, so that is kind of getting them out without pulling in the same root structure. So these are just a few of the tips. There's more in the article. I hope you'll read it. I hope you find something, a tip or trick or two that makes your weeding life easier and helps you save the plants in your garden that you've worked so hard to grow.